I was 17 years old when the ground beneath my feet vanished. It was a chilly October morning in 2009, the kind where the air bites at your fingertips and the leaves crunch under your boots. My dad, James, was in the kitchen, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows as he finished his coffee. He was a mechanic, the kind of man who could fix anything with a wrench and a grin. That morning, he pulled me into a bear hug, his stubble scratching my cheek. "See you tonight, Lisa," he said, his voice warm, like the engine hum he loved so much. I smiled back, watching him grab his keys and head out the door. Mom, Margaret, sat at the table, her eyes glued to the newspaper, barely acknowledging him. I remember thinking how strange that felt. They used to tease each other over burnt toast or share quiet smiles across the room. That was the last time I saw him alive. The call came just after lunch. I was in history class, doodling in my notebook, when the principal's voice crackled over the intercom, summoning me to her office. My stomach dropped. I knew something was wrong. Mom was already there, her coat still on, her face oddly blank. "There's been an accident," she said, her tone clipped. "Your father's gone." The words didn't make sense at first. A drunk driver had plowed through a red light on Route 12, smashing into Dad's pickup truck. The police said he died instantly, his hands still gripping the wheel. I sank into a chair, tears spilling down my face. But Mom just stood there, arms crossed, like she was waiting for a bus. Back home, I curled up on the couch, clutching one of Dad's old jackets, the smell of oil and aftershave clinging to the fabric. Mom paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice cut through the haze of my grief. "Yes, Susan, it's awful," she said to her friend, pausing to sip her tea. "But the insurance will take care of us. Honestly, it's almost a relief. No messy divorce, just a clean break." She let out a small laugh, sharp and cold. "Widow has a nicer ring to it, don't you think?" I froze, my breath catching in my throat. She wasn't sad. She was calculating. My dad, the man who'd spent his life building a home for us, was reduced to a payout in her eyes. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. "My name is Lisa," and at 17, I learned my mother wasn't the woman I'd thought she was. She didn't cry at the funeral, didn't falter as she accepted condolences in her sleek black dress. She played the part well, head bowed, voice soft, but I saw through it. Aunt Clara, Dad's older sister, stood beside me at the graveside, her jaw tight. "She's always been good at pretending," Clara whispered, squeezing my hand. I nodded, a knot of anger and betrayal tightening in my chest. Dad was gone, and Mom was already moving on, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life she didn't care to mourn. The months after Dad's death blurred into a haze of silence and change. I turned 18 in January 2010, but there was no cake, no celebration. Just a card from Aunt Clara slipped under my door. Mom was too busy reshaping our lives to notice. By spring, she'd met David Carter, a slick-haired salesman with a handshake that lingered too long. He had 2 kids from his first marriage. Ethan, 16, with a cocky grin and a soccer ball always under his arm, and Sophie, 15, whose sharp eyes judged everything I wore. I didn't see it coming, but by the time I finished my junior year, David and his kids had moved into our house, their boxes crowding the living room where Dad's old armchair still sat. Mom threw herself into her new role like it was a performance. She'd flutter around the kitchen, whipping up lasagna or garlic bread, meals she'd never bothered with when it was just us. "Ethan needs his strength for practice," she'd say, piling his plate high. Or, "Sophie's growing so fast, she deserves a treat." I'd sit at the far end of the table, pushing cold pasta around my fork, while they laughed and swapped stories about David's latest sales pitch or Sophie's art club. If I spoke, Mom would nod absently, her eyes already drifting back to them. It was like I'd become a ghost in my own home. One evening, as the dishes clinked in the sink, Mom cornered me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lisa, David and I have something to tell you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. David lounged on the couch, one arm around Ethan, while Sophie scrolled her phone nearby. We're married now, a real family. Isn't that exciting? You've got a new dad and siblings. I stared at her, my throat tight. Sure, Mom, I managed, forcing a nod. Ethan smirked, kicking his soccer ball against the wall, and Sophie didn't even look up. Family? They didn't want me. They wanted my space, my life, my mom. It only got worse. Ethan's cleats scuffed the hardwood floors Dad had sanded himself, and Sophie claimed my old reading nook for her art studio. Her paint splattered across the shelves. When I asked Mom if I could keep it, she waved me off. Don't be selfish, Lisa. They need to feel at home. But what about me? Ethan got new gear every season. Sophie got fancy sketchbooks. But when I asked for a new backpack, mine was splitting at the seams. Mom rolled her eyes. We're stretched thin, Lisa. You'll manage. I stopped asking, scavenging thrift stores instead, while they flaunted their shiny new things. Then came the trips. Weekends at the lake, camping in the state park, family outings I was never part of. You'd hate it, Mom would say, tossing snacks into a bag for Ethan and Sophie. Stay home and watch the house. I'd watch them pile into David's SUV, their laughter fading down the street, leaving me with nothing but silence and a list of chores. Those weekends, I'd pack a duffel and head to Aunt Clara's. Her cottage was small, with creaky floors, and a kettle always simmering, but it felt more like home than the house I'd grown up in. This isn't how it's supposed to be, Clara would mutter, pouring me tea. She's choosing them over you. I'd shrug, staring into my mug. She made her choice a long time ago. By summer, I was invisible. Mom's Instagram filled with photos, Ethan scoring goals, Sophie sketching by the water, David grilling burgers, all captioned with "My perfect crew" or "Family first." I wasn't in a single frame. They'd erased me, building their shiny new life on the ruins of mine. And every day, the knot in my chest grew tighter. Anger, hurt, and a quiet resolve I didn't yet know how to name. By the time I hit my senior year, I knew I couldn't stay in that house much longer. Mom's new family had taken over every corner. Ethan's soccer trophies lined the mantel. Sophie's drawings plastered the fridge, and David's loud laugh echoed through rooms that used to be quiet with Dad's steady presence. I turned 19 in January 2011, and college loomed like a lifeline. One night, over a rare dinner where I wasn't banished to my room, I took a deep breath and spoke. Mom, I've been accepted to Oregon State. I want to study environmental science. The table went silent. Mom's fork hovered midair, then clattered down. College, she said, her voice sharp. Lisa, we can't swing that. Ethan's got tournaments coming up, and Sophie's art classes aren't cheap. Ethan grinned across the table, and Sophie twirled her hair, smug. David didn't even look up from his steak. Later, I followed Mom into the kitchen, my heart pounding. What about Dad's insurance money? He saved it for me, for my future. Her eyes narrowed, cold and hard. That money's gone, Lisa. It kept this roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. Don't be ungrateful. I stood there, stunned. Dad had worked overtime for years, socking away every spare dime. I knew she was lying, but the truth hit me harder. She'd spent it all on David's kids, on her perfect little lie. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked away. That weekend, I showed up at Aunt Clara's with red eyes and a backpack slung over my shoulder. She didn't say a word at first, just pulled me into a hug and let me cry. When I finally spilled everything, Mom's dismissal, the stolen future, she listened, her face calm, but her hands clenched tight around her tea mug. Then she stood up and disappeared into her bedroom. I heard drawers rattling, and she came back with a thick envelope, placing it gently on the table. Your dad came to me a few weeks before the accident, she said, her voice low. He was worried about Margaret, said she'd been pulling away. He gave me this and made me swear to keep it safe until you needed it. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a bank statement, a trust fund in my name, with Clara as the trustee. Tens of thousands, growing with interest. He wanted you to have this, she said, no matter what. I wiped my eyes, a spark igniting inside me. We can't tell Mom, I whispered. Clara nodded. Not a soul. That summer, I moved out. Mom and David barely blinked. "You're 19 now," David said, leaning against the wall as I taped up my last box. "Time to figure things out." They didn't ask where I was going or how I'd pay for it, just watched me haul my stuff to Clara's truck. As we drove away, the house shrank in the rearview mirror, and I didn't feel sad, just free. Oregon State was a world away, 2 states and a lifetime from Mom's suffocating stage. Clara's trust fund covered tuition, and I worked at a campus cafe, pouring coffee for bleary-eyed students and pocketing tips from kind regulars. The owner, Mrs. Evans, slipped me extra shifts when rent loomed. I threw myself into my classes. Environmental science felt like a way to honor Dad, who'd loved tinkering with machines and talking about the world. My roommate Tara became my anchor. She didn't push when I kept quiet about my past. But one night over pizza, I told her everything. She hugged me tight. "They don't deserve you, Lisa. Screw them." I graduated at 23, summa cum laude, my cap tassel swinging as I crossed the stage. Tara's dad, Daniel Pierce, ran a sustainability firm and spotted my final project at a showcase. "You've got a head for this," he said, offering me a job as an analyst. I grabbed it with both hands. Late nights, endless reports, and a drive I didn't know I had pushed me up. By 29, I was a project manager, my name on the door of a small office with a view. At 31, I bought a condo in Portland, all clean lines and big windows, and a hybrid SUV that purred like Dad's old truck never could. Clara was the only one I told, her pride shining through every phone call. Mom's world, Ethan's goals, Sophie's sketches, faded to a distant hum on her Instagram, where I didn't exist, and I was fine with that. In October 2025, when I was 33, a message blinked onto my phone screen, sharp and unexpected. "Lisa, it's your mother. My 58th birthday's next month. Party at La View. You wouldn't know the place. Be there 8 p.m. sharp. Don't let me down." After 15 years of silence, this was her grand re-entry. A demand wrapped in a backhanded jab. No warmth, no hint of regret. I stared at it, thumb hovering over delete. But something, curiosity, maybe defiance, stopped me. I booked a week off work and called Aunt Clara. Over tea in her cozy kitchen, she raised an eyebrow. "What's your move?" I grinned, sliding my phone across the table. The screen showed a confirmation. A $25,000 luxury trip to New Zealand. First-class flights, a 5-star eco-resort, all included. Clara whistled. "She doesn't deserve a dime of that." "Oh, I know," I said, sipping my tea, "but I want her to see what she lost." The night of the party, November 16th, I slipped into a navy dress, simple, elegant, worth more than it looked, and took a cab to Lavu. The place screamed fake sophistication, overpriced cocktails, gold-dusted desserts, the kind of spot that impressed people who'd never seen real class. I'd been to better for work dinners. The hostess led me to a private room where Mom reigned at the head of a long table, her silver dress glinting under a cheap chandelier. David sat beside her, Ethan and Sophie on either side like loyal courtiers. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in over a decade filled the rest, their faces a mix of vague recognition and disinterest. Mom flicked her eyes over me. "Lisa, you came. You could have dressed up more." Her tone was a knife, but I just smiled and took a seat at the far end. The gift parade began. Scarves, candles, a spa voucher, each met with Mom's theatrical gasps and hugs. Ethan and Sophie went last, standing with matching smirks. "Mom," Ethan said, "we saved up for something big." Sophie flashed her phone, a 70-inch TV, already set up at home. Mom clutched her chest, tears welling up. My generous babies, how did I get so lucky? Then it was my turn. Every head swiveled. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box. Mom's face soured. "What's this supposed to be?" she snapped. "Open it," I said, calm as stone. She didn't. Instead, she flung it back at me, the box skidding across the table. "Typical Lisa," Showing up in that dull outfit, probably bussing in, and now this sad little thing. What's in it? A gas station gift card? Ethan snickered. Sophie hid a laugh, and the room held its breath. I picked up the box, brushing off a crumb. Funny you say that, Mom, I said, voice steady. It's a receipt for a $25,000 trip to New Zealand. First class, 5-star, the works. I'm a project manager at Pierce Sustainability. Own a condo, drive an SUV. Took a cab tonight because I didn't trust your parking. You'd know this if you'd bothered with me in the last 15 years. But since my gift's not good enough, enjoy the TV. I slipped the box back into my bag, stood, and walked out. My heels clicked against the silence, their stunned faces fading behind me. For the first time, I held the power, and it felt good. I didn't look back as I left LaView. The cool November air hit my face, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The cab ride to Aunt Clara's was quiet, the city lights blurring past like a dream I'd finally woken from. She was waiting, as always, with 2 mugs of chamomile tea steaming on her coffee table. I sank into her worn couch, kicking off my heels, and told her everything. Mom's outburst, the box sliding across the table, the stunned silence as I walked away. Clara chuckled, shaking her head. She never could handle being upstaged. Some people don't change, Lisa. I nodded, sipping my tea. I'm done trying to make her. My phone buzzed before I'd finished the mug. Mom's number, blocked years ago, had slipped through on a new line. Lisa, sweetheart, her voice oozed through the speaker, thick with fake honey. I overreacted. That gift. It's incredible. I'd love to accept it. Can't we start over? We're family. I laughed, short and sharp. No, Mom. You don't want me. You want the trip. We're not family, just strangers with the same blood. I hung up, and she didn't stop. Calls from David's phone, Ethan's, even Sophie's, followed by texts. Call me back. We need to talk. Ethan could use a job. Your company sounds big. Sophie's applying to colleges. An internship would help. The garage needs fixing, and you're doing so well. Each one was a claw, reaching for what she thought I owed her. I blocked them all, one by one. A week later, Clara called me at my condo. Your mom showed up here today, she said, a laugh in her voice. Demanded your address, said she had a right to know where her daughter lives. I told her to get off my porch, or I'd call the cops. I pictured it. Mom in one of her gaudy outfits, stomping her foot on Clara's steps, her mask slipping as the neighbors peeked out. She didn't take it well, Clara went on. Yelled about ungrateful brats, you and me both, before peeling out. She's desperate, Lisa. Watch yourself. I'd already warned my office security and locked down my social media. She couldn't touch me anymore. Standing in my condo that night, I walked the rooms I'd built from scratch. Soft gray furniture, a bookshelf stuffed with novels, a view of Portland's skyline glowing beyond the glass. Every piece was mine, earned through years of grit and quiet victories. Mom had traded me for her shiny facade, and now she scrambled for crumbs of my success. It was almost funny. Her perfect family hadn't panned out, and I'd become the prize she'd never seen coming. But I didn't need her envy or her guilt. I'd outgrown her long ago. The next morning, I called the travel agency and swapped the New Zealand trip into Clara's name. When I told her over lunch, she sputtered into her soup. Lisa, no, that's too much. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You've been my real mom since I was 17. You deserve it more than she ever will. Her eyes welled up, and she pulled me into a hug, her lavender scent wrapping around me like home. We spent the afternoon planning. Hikes in the fjords, dinners under the stars, our own little adventure, no strings attached. That evening, back at my place, I scrolled through Mom's Instagram one last time. Ethan posing with a beat-up car, Sophie's mall selfies, captions dripping with blessed and hustle. I wasn't there, never had been. I closed the app, deleted it, and set my phone down. Clara was right. I was writing my own story now. Family wasn't blood or a name on a certificate. It was the woman who'd held me up when I fell, who'd kept Dad's love alive for me. With her, I was whole. And that was more than enough.